existence of DC canon Judas implies the existence of DC canon Jesus. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay,
I mean, Satan's real. Lucifer's around.
That's true. Okay.
It's probably the cold open. Hello and welcome to Can't Let It Go, a show about the things stuck in our heads. My name is Matt and I use he, him pronouns.
I'm AC. I use they, them pronouns.
I'm Alex Jaffe. I use he, him pronouns.
Wow.
Welcome to the show, Alex. Whoa.
Wow,
we can't do that at the exact same time.
You know what? I insist you do it at the same time. I want to be welcomed in stereo.
Yeah. We've only been friends for like 12 years, Matt. 15
It's been
years.
a very long time.
Mm-hmm.
Well, we'll start like fully being joined at the hip soon when Matt moves back to the
When I move
greater
back to DC.
DC area.
Yeah. Alex, thanks for being on the show today.
Of course. Happy 1 year anniversary,
Oh my gosh.
guys.
Hey.
Hey, it's our 1 year anniversary. We recorded our very first episode 1 year ago today, which is wild to think about.
Mm-hmm.
We've covered a lot of topics with you all so far, and I am just like so excited to record so many more episodes of this, as many more as like Matt and I can stand, which is a lot, probably. We can tell.
We have at least 10 more just like ready to go that we want to do immediately.
Our note stock is wild.
I just think it's amazing that a year in after you've established this chemistry that you've chosen to shake things up by adding a third co-host. And,
I mean, you're welcome.
Welcome to the show, Alex. We're so excited to have you here.
yeah.
So, Alex, I said to you in an email that I am aware of your work on Insert Credit, on 52 Pickup, which we mentioned a couple of weeks ago on the show.
Oh, thank you.
And also your writing on DC.com.
Yeah.
That's right.
Heck yeah.
All those endeavors are unrelated. Everything I say in 52 Pickup is not meant to be seen as any kind of endorsement of my work over there. They're two separate Alex Jaffes.
Whoa, he looks just like you.
Yeah, you can speak to either of them.
Okay.
Alex, I explained the concept of 52 Pickup on the show a couple episodes ago, but I'm betting that you can do a better job, both of what 52 is and what you and Geeta are doing over on 52 Pickup.
Okay. So I've always wanted to be on a comic book podcast, having done Insert Credit since 2012.
Wow.
I love video games, but my first passion has always been comic books. And my favorite journalist in the field of comics coverage has always been, well, not always, but has been for many years now, Geeta Jackson.
I do love
who
Geeta.
has written for Paste, written for Joystick, written for all these different outlets. Just this incredibly incisive, coherent commentary of just media literate reads of comics that are rarely applied to that field. Like, it's so rare to see a journalist providing cogent criticism of the output of Marvel and DC more than who died in the latest event or which writer is disrespecting canon. It's fun to see some literary criticism as opposed to the nuances of kayfabe, as it were.
Yeah.
So I went to a Shabbat dinner over at Geeta's last year, I guess, and Geeta mentioned that they were interested in doing their own podcast about 52, which was this comic book that came out in 2006 from DC, where the idea was that rather than releasing an issue every month, which is what most comics do, they would make the insane decision of releasing a comic book every single week for a year without missing a week. And to do it, they would put 4 of the hottest comic book writers in the industry in a writer's room together so they could hash out the plot. And they already had a beginning and they already had the end as mandated to them by editorial, and they had to fill in the middle. And there are just 10 million reasons why it should not have worked, but everything worked anyway in this just kind of miraculous moment of collaboration and creativity that many have tried to replicate since, but have never been successful. So naturally, I spoke to Gita about this for 3 hours nonstop. And by the time I came home, I got a text from Gita that was like, we have to do this show together.
Amazing.
Alex, you sold me on the show, and I've never read 52. Like that. I'm like, yeah, actually, I think I need to read that and also listen to your entire podcast.
I love listening to your podcast, and I love when you all bring up Lost and like its comparisons to 52.
Yes.
And just like the era that it was written in. You all sold me so hard on the book that I listened to episode 0 because I'm a big Gita fan, so I was there, and was finished with it by about a week after episode 1 came out.
I love that. Yeah. 52 was a huge step for both of us back in 2006 of getting into the idea of like a shared comic book universe. Because the core concept of 52 is that after the big event of Infinite Crisis, where your mileage may vary, Superman, Batman, and Wonder Woman were off the board. They were all taking a sabbatical for a year for various reasons. And 52 was about, well, when the biggest heroes are not around, what happens in the DC universe? Who picks up the slack? Who fills the vacuum? Who takes advantage? Which new heroes rise? And it's really what I love about 52 and what made me fall in love with the DC universe through it was the idea of how big that world is when you get the looming figure of Batman out of the way. It's not Batman and all these other guys. There are thousands and thousands of weird little guys who are interesting in their own way.
Now, when it comes to selling comics, it's definitely Batman and all the other guys.
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
But that's not what I'm there for.
Right, exactly.
I love that. I feel like right now is a great moment for me to introduce our nugget, because I feel like that is like, we're so on track. Alex, you've teed us up incredibly.
I am a professional.
I'm going to talk about something completely different for like 5-ish minutes. And then we're going to hear all about one of those particular characters who is, able to be noticed more when Batman is out of the way. So, listener, my nugget for you this week is actually a callback to a previous episode where I tried to talk you into watching NBC's The Traitors, hosted by Alan Cumming, a game show that had more survivor parallels. Parallels, yes, thank you. Had more survivor parallels than I even knew, and got me to watch Survivor, which we then talked about on the show. But season 2 is out, and it is juicy. I'm living. It's everything you could want. Matt, do you know what is different about season 2 of The Traitors versus season 1? Have you explored?
I don't. Okay. I just know that like Sandra and Parvati are on it.
Yes. Okay. So Sandra, Sandra is there and she is doing a lot. Parvati is there and she is doing a lot. She's doing actually so much. It's incredible. There are no regular people on this season, which honestly I kind of miss. They're all B-list or is B-list Bravo? I don't know what tier the Bravo celebrities like. So this season, the like divisions are between the Bravo celebrities and the the gamers, they're calling them. So the people who have previously been on competition game shows of some kind.
Got it.
So like that's where the divisions are forming. But like the standout star is Phaedra, who was from one of the seasons of Real Housewives. This like level of sassiness that she brings to the table is extra and new to me. Previously brought by Kate, but now there's multiple people bringing that energy, and it's incredible.
No.
Now, I listened to the episode where you previously brought this show up.
Oh, probably.
And what I'm curious about is how Traitors is different from the 2001 reality show The Mole that aired on ABC.
Okay.
Yes.
Great question. I also really liked The Mole. It does have some key differences. The first is that like the mole, right, is a paid actor who doesn't win anything if like the mole beats everybody else by getting to the end of the game. In the Traitors, they are all competing for the money. If all of the Traitors get to the end of the game, the 3 of them, or however many of them there are at the end of the game, could be 1, could be 2, could be 3, could be 5, we don't know, is like a thing that they do. It's been 3 every time so far. But the Traitors who get to the end of the game split that prize money between a smaller number of people versus like if the faithful get to the end of the game, they split the money among themselves. Yeah. And then there's a way that nobody gets money, but that hasn't happened yet. And I don't know if it would because it's not super satisfying TV.
Yeah, it's also less styled like James Bond and more like aesthetically like Agatha Christie.
Correct. Yes. Yes. And I mean, it takes place in a castle in Scotland. They really play that up. They let Alan Cumming dress himself, which is a really important part of why I love the show. Yeah. I am going to say, without spoiling the details, episode 3 is funerary themed, funeral procession march themed. There is both a kilt and a very large billowing cape and a lace veil situation. So
wonderful.
It's I think the other thing for me about it is that like it is campy in a very purposeful way that like a lot of game shows are often dancing around, and it instead just fully embraced this concept and was like, we're all in, we're not pretending this is anything other than a silly, goofy time. And they figured out that like people are there for Alan, right? Like the people are living for Alan. And so there's a lot more like commentary on his little outfits and things like that. So it's been very fun. And if I actually am very delighted to see that some folks who I know and if I have followed on socials because they're listeners of the show, people who I have seen now posting about Traitors season 2, Diana, Rochelle, I see you. It's so good this season. I'm so excited you're watching along with me. Matt and I might do a finale episode. You guys might get it.
Yeah. If you ever want me back for a second episode that has nothing to do with comics, I could probably talk for hours about the one reality game show that I'm obsessed with. Which is Taskmaster.
Oh my God, I love Taskmaster.
I am so obsessed with Taskmaster that I'm watching the Danish Taskmaster right now because I've run out of English episodes of Taskmaster.
Incredible. That's true dedication. Yes. I love that. I have not quite gotten there yet. I have watched the Australia and UK seasons of the Traitors. I enjoyed the US version the most, I will say. And it's what I recommend. So I love Taskmaster. Incredible.
Oh, God. I don't even know where to start. But, like, fortunately, that's not what I have to talk about today. We can do that another time. We can do that for the 2-year anniversary.
That would be so fun.
Well, with that, let's get into the questions about the question. I'm sure that you've heard that before. But
I can't stop hearing it, and I can't hear it enough. Puns are part of the game. That's the whole DC thing. Have you never watched Adam West's Batman?
Many
I have,
times.
In fact, many times. Yeah. So today we're going to talk about the DC superhero character, The Question.
Well, he wasn't always a DC hero.
Yes. So this is something I want to get into pretty immediately. Alex, who or what is The Question?
Okay, the Question's this fedora-wearing, blue-suited man who got no face. And he was created by Steve Ditko, co-creator of Spider-Man, in the 1960s for a company called Charlton Comics that Ditko left Marvel for a brief time because he was upset with, the raw deal that Stan Lee had given him.
Sure.
The way Stan kind of mishandled his co-creators many times. Just ask Jack Kirby. Yeah. As part of that ilk, he broke free to make some of his own heroes for this third string company based out of Chicago, I believe. And The Question was kind of very much a riff on characters like the Spirit or the Shadow, like kind of the pulpy characters who were around the same time that Bob Kane and Bill Finger were creating Batman, if not a little bit earlier. And his deal was that he was this morally uncompromising sojourner of truth, where he by day was this news reporter and would expose inconvenient truths to people that they weren't ready to hear or didn't want to know, or society was better off, considered themselves better off not hearing. And he would just go into these dens of iniquity and expose the corruption within them. And despite the fact that everybody hated him for doing it, he would do it because he stood up for what he believed in. Everyone else be damned. This version of the Question that Steve Ditko created is in like 8 stories, and is the he was a pretty obscure character. And when people talk about the Question, they think about this version because it's the version that Steve Ditko created, and very famously the version that Alan Moore borrows when he's using the Charlton characters as ciphers in his seminal work Watchmen. Rorschach, the character there, is based on the Question. And the way that happened is that after Charlton went out of business, as most comic book publishers that came out about during the mid-20th century did, DC went and bought their stable of superheroes from them in the 80s. They bought Blue Beetle. They bought Captain Atom. They bought Nightshade. They bought Judo Master. And most importantly to me, they bought the Question. And they, after Crisis on Infinite Earths, which was their big line-wide shakeup to just set a new status quo for this crufty 50-year universe they had been building up since 1935, they incorporated these new Charlton heroes as part of it. And one of the heroes they needed this new interpretation of was the Question, who was this very hard-line, radical character who had these, frankly, objectivist viewpoints. Yes.
Oh, my God.
Let's talk about the O word.
Oh, man.
Steve Ditko would not tell you necessarily that he was a Randian, but he had a lot of respect for Ayn Rand. The Fountainhead and Atlas Shrugged were big seminal works for him. Oof. I met his nephew at Comic-Con last year, and he had a t-shirt on that said, "Who is John Galt?" So that's kind of what's going on over there.
Boy.
Oh, no.
So one of my questions to you was, what was behind Steve Ditko's creation of the Question? And it sounds like we know.
We know. And even the Question was a dialed down version of what Steve Ditko had in mind. He had created another character around that time called Mr. A, who was even more radical and did just kind of these, very much in line with what Alan Moore was, I would say, parodying in Watchmen, of this character who is, who just, if you broke the law, you broke the law. There's no mercy for you. Just this very black and white way of viewing the world. It's no mistake that Moore and Gibbons gave Rorschach a literally black and white mask that doesn't have any room for grace. It's very, very much intentional. It's within the text. So they got this character. Who is, in a sense, admirable. It's standing up for what you believe in, even when it's unpopular, has remained a cornerstone of the character, and it's something to aspire to, as long as you take other people's viewpoints into account. And, it's objectivism and Randism is not a system without merit. It's just when you get to the end goal, which is therefore fuck everyone else,
right?
That everything falls apart.
Right. That's so interesting, right? That for a character named the Question, there's just like this lack of ambiguity, right? Like
exactly, yes. And I'm about to get to that.
I now have questions, and I need to know more. So say more before I just start peppering you.
His questions were about society and never about himself.
Oh.
Which is what changes when he gets to DC Comics. When the Question gets to DC Comics, they give him to writer Denny O'Neil. Denny O'Neil was the resident hippie of the DC Comics writing staff. He was the anti-establishment dude who was always the troublemaker. He created Ra's al Ghul He was the one who is pretty much responsible for giving Batman a personality in the 70s. He's the one who made Green Arrow into this left-wing socialist who hates cops and billionaires.
Sorry.
Denny's the best. Yeah.
Sorry, I'm still laughing at gave Batman a personality. That's simply so funny and so true.
Yeah. Before 1970, Batman's personality was cop.
Correct.
Yeah.
I mean, and in many ways it became his personality again.
Okay. I'll say in the 1940s it was scary cop. Then it became cop.
Yeah. And then mysterious cop for a while.
Yes.
So you mentioned the O'Neill run. And I picked this up on Black Friday at a local comic shop that sells their wall books for $5, no matter what they are. And it's the number one from the O'Neill.
That's one half of the question story I recommend to everybody. The question number 1 and 2, 1986 to 1987.
Cool.
Which is when Denny O'Neill gets this character who is so morally the opposite of everything he stands for. And he's like, I know what I'm going to do. I'm going to kill him in the first issue. Yeah. So the question ends up confronting this mob. He meets the assassin Lady Shiva, who's maybe my second favorite DC character. He gets the utter shit kicked out of him. He's shot and he's drowned in a lake, and the issue ends. He's dead. He is embarrassed and utterly humiliated. He's just gone. Next issue, Shiva fishes him out of the river, brings him back to life because that's kind of her whole deal, and drops him off with her old training buddy, Richard Dragon, who is this kung fu character from the 70s that Denny created when he was just starting comics. And Richard Dragon, he's a Zen philosopher, and he's all about kind of this holistic idea of the universe speaking to you through multiple voices, and you have to kind of listen to everything around you. And it's this entirely new thing for the question that other perspectives exist outside of his own. And the entire series is about the question learning to question his own reality, that maybe the world isn't as black and white as he assumed. And he's going to have to keep learning and growing and adjusting his perspective to the world around him. And when I first read this series, it was a revelation to me because, to quote, I think you should leave, I used to be a real piece of shit.
I was going to ask a bit of like, is the series talking to its readers in the way that comics can do sometimes?
Oh, in this case, absolutely. I think Denny was, it's very much an autobiographical comic for Denny in that it's about, it does the same thing as his Batman's arc and his Green Arrow stuff. That it's about how none of us are really perfect, but the best we can hope to do is be a little bit better every day. And that's what a good person is. And we all start from these relatively shitty places, but we can get better if we just listen to people and take into account the injustices around us. Heroism is not beyond anybody. Growth is not beyond anybody. The question wears this blank mask to erase his own identity so he can stand for an ideal, but it also represents a canvas that anything can be painted on. And this is something I learned long after I first got into the question, because I was first introduced to the character through a cartoon.
Oh my God. Wait,
there we go.
I was literally, the question that I have teed up to ask you is, so my biggest thing, like I became a Batman fan as a kid because I watched the Justice League cartoon and Justice League Unlimited. And so that
Of course you did.
Yeah. Yeah. So
everyone our age did. Yeah. It was Bruce Timm and Paul Dini's universe that brought us into this.
And it is a show from childhood, like that I go back to over and over again. It's the thing that made me love Wonder Woman. And it's still maybe like, it's pretty up there for me in terms of like Wonder Woman stories. Like when I think of like which Wonder Woman stories do I really enjoy, that's on the list of like my top 5. So my question for you was like, how do you feel about how the Question is portrayed in Justice League Unlimited? And like, is it true to this version in the comics? Is it something else entirely?
Now, this is a very interesting question. This is how I first got into him. This is how I first saw there's this weird guy lurking around the halls of justice, who's just like going around saying creepy stuff to people, and everyone's kind of weirded out by it, because like that was something I really empathized with as a kid when I saw it. I was always kind of the weirdo in school. People didn't really get what I was talking about. And like I was bringing up topics of conversation that like people took for granted as just like social norms because I was autistic and didn't know it yet.
Hell yeah. Same.
So I empathize with that character very much. And when he showed up in an early JLU episode with Green Arrow and Supergirl, just kind of walking up to these Superman level villains and being like, hey, what's your deal? Without just like an ounce of terror in them. And just zero explanation to why he's around with no face.
No face.
I had to know literally everything. And like, and you know, like 52, the magic of Justice League Unlimited is that it showcased these characters you never got to see. It wasn't just Batman. It was, here are all these other weirdos in the DC universe. And it was from Justice League Unlimited that ended in 2006. And 52 started in 2006, and I saw the Question was one of the main characters. Like, well, this is my on-board point. So it's through the Question that I really got to the expertise in the DC universe that I now professionally employ today.
That's really cool.
Is that how you got into comics, was through 52?
I would say so. My dad gave me a Captain Marvel treasury when I was 3 years old, and I learned to read off that. I collected Superman books in the 90s, and, you know, I love Batman the Animated Series, but I wasn't into the idea of, like, a collective comic book universe until 52. 52 was, like, the moment where I went from following individual titles to, I need to know everything that's happening here. And it just hasn't let up since then. So the Justice League Unlimited version of the Question was created by the great Dwayne McDuffie, R.I.P., a genius. And he was kind of like many of the best characters in that series, was borrowing flavors from different interpretations to create one gumbo. So there was a lot of Rorschach in there. There was a lot of Ditko's Question, of that like just hardline like personality who stands iconoclastically. But he had Denny's sense of humor and Denny's propensity for failure. The idea that like he got this shit wrong all the time, but he incorporated those failures and kept going. The purpose of the Question is not to be right. It's to ask questions until you get those answers.
That's so interesting.
I always really thought too of like the Question as like such an interesting contrast to like Batman in the way that like you are kind of like trained through these different forms of media that like Batman is contemplating these kinds of things, but in his head, that's why he's doing the brooding. Right. And like the Question is provoking these questions, like is asking these things out loud in a way that I always found really relatable as well, because like I'm stewing on it. And then I also reach a point where I'm like, now I'm asking it out loud because it's occurred to me that I need to ask someone about it.
And it's that kind of idea of like a person who's trying to uncover this greater conspiracy that's hatched in JLU that makes it into 52. Which was his next appearance after his next major appearance after his 80s Denny O'Neil series, which was written by Greg Rucka, one of the four writers of 52, who studied under O'Neil. They wrote a lot together. Denny was his editor, so he kind of inherited the Question from him, and he took that kind of conspiracy angle. And speaking of 52 being influenced by shows like Lost, the dynamic between the Question and Renee Montoya, who he kind of picked out as his protege, is very informed by like Fox Mulder and Dana Scully. Like these,
my God,
my
babies.
Yeah, this spooky guy who's insistent that the world is bigger than it is, and this skeptic in his shadow.
Alex, you don't even know it, but that actually you could have just come on the show and said that, and you would have convinced me to read this entire run. I love that so much. I love Fox Mulder so much. I based my Dungeons and Dragons character on him, so it's entirely incredible.
It's my favorite television dynamic until they screwed it up and made them date each other. They solved that in the comics because Renee Montoya is a lesbian. So it just works.
So I have so many things to ask about this, but just gotta say first, I am so happy to have read 52 because it and Batwoman have really just sold me on Renee Montoya and also Greg Rucka. And I'm just like huge fans of both of them. I know that you and I have interacted on Blue Sky a bit, which is, how you arrived here. But you recommended to me some stuff, just more Renee Montoya after reading 52. The question in here is, spoilers for 52, I guess, but at the ending of that, she takes on the mantle of the question. And I'm curious, just like, what versions of the question exist out there other than like Vic Sage, the original, and how do they differ from one another?
All right. So I guess big spoilers for 52, but the big reason that Vic is looking for a protege is that he's dying of cancer. And he needs somebody to he wants to influence someone who is in the same kind of dark space that he was when Richard Dragon pulled him out, to pass that lesson on to somebody else. That's how he kind of maintains cosmic balance. There's nothing, there's no value to what you learn unless you teach it to someone else. That's legacy. And he meets Renee Montoya at the lowest point of her life. She had just come off of Greg Rucka's Gotham Central, where she was this major cop in Gotham City who gets disillusioned with the system and quits the force, as the only good cop does. And she's just utterly directionless, looking for purpose at the bottom of a bottle and with whatever random woman she can hook up with. And Vic gives her a purpose, and they become unlikely friends. And when he dies, she picks up his mission. And it's a really beautiful passing of the torch, one of my favorite legacy stories in comics. Unfortunately, the stories after that point can't really figure out much of what to do with Renee. It takes this really kind of like occult bend where like she's like investigating these like the religion of crime, and just like coming face to face with Vandal Savage. And there's some interesting stuff there, but it gets a little supernatural.
AC, you're making your face about the religion of crime.
Sorry, that's not something I've heard of before, and I have so many questions. I don't like that.
Oh yeah, that's the question's last case. He's investigating the religion of crime.
Interesting.
Which Greg Rucka has always said, like, I wish I gave them a better name than that.
Yeah, they show up in that Batwoman story, the Greg Rucka Batwoman story, and it's a choice.
He tries to pivot it to calling them the Dark Faith, but by that point, religion of crime has already stuck.
Sure, yeah.
And it turns out to be Vandal Savage, who's like one of the big bads of the DC universe, manipulating everybody, which fits because like he's always been kind of the head of this Illuminati organization. So I love the idea that Vic's nemesis of his entire career with this villain he didn't even ever get to meet, and it's only Renee who ultimately confronts him. That's all wiped away in 2011 because of a reboot, which DC often does. And Renee just kind of disappears for a while. And when she does come back, it's as a cop. And that's not fun for anybody.
Yeah.
And right now she's commissioner of the GCPD. But she's also like, maybe I can also be the question. And it's like, no, it's one or the other, man.
Yeah, I played a little bit of that Gotham Knights game that came out last year or the year before.
Yeah, did you?
And I replayed the beginning of it recently for some dumb reasons. And I heard them scream her name as, I believe she was commissioner or like chief or something in that game. I was like, oh, I get that reference now.
Yeah. But while Renee Montoya disappeared from 2011 to 2016, and Vic Sage was off the board too, there was a different question who was part of this mystical outfit called the Trinity of Sin. That was introduced by Jeff Johns in his Justice League run, where it was Pandora, like the literal Pandora of the box fame. Phantom
box.
Phantom
box.
Stranger, who's kind of a mystic, obscure DC character who they revealed to be the biblical Judas for some reason.
Oh my God.
What?
Yeah. And that's why he has to walk the earth forever, because he betrayed Jesus.
Oh my God.
This was a real thing someone decided.
So,
And then there was the question, whose deal we didn't know. His face and his identity had been stripped from him, so that it wasn't a mask anymore. That was just what his face was. And he had to kind of wander the earth without any identity of who he was. And it was this big unsolved mystery in the DC universe. It's this big, like, dropped plot line. And, like, the number one question I get about the question is what this guy's deal was. It was never explained in the comics. In fact, his last appearance is him grousing to the reader that we never got to get to my deal.
That's incredible.
So funny. Sorry, I'm still processing that. That's incredible.
Yeah. That happens in comics all the time with these shifting priorities and editorial mandates and different writers coming on, that there are these plots they set up that just go unresolved. That's just the nature of collaborative comic book storytelling, when it's not just one guy doing it the whole thing. We can't all be Eiichiro Oda making this like 25-year manga epic where you have every little detail plotted out. It's a One Piece reference.
Yes, I haven't seen that, but I.
Okay. Oh, I could come back. Yeah, I just finished episode 500.
Oh Lord, this is why I will never start One Piece.
Oh, here's the thing about One Piece. Once you start One Piece, you never have to ask again, what am I going to watch tonight? Because the answer is always One Piece. And there's a comfort in that.
That's so funny. Matt, do you want to grab this next question? I have a follow-up question that we had written down that feels like a really well suited at this point. What are the question's powers? How does that okay, so we've kind of gotten into the meat and potatoes of like, who is the question? How did this character come into existence? What does the question do? What's going on with his powers?
Here's his thing. The question's thing is that he does everything Batman does, but not as well. He's pretty good at martial arts, but like most people who like specialize in martial arts could kick his ass.
Okay.
He's a very determined detective, but he's not able to like figure things out just by looking at a crime scene. He's got to like actually do the legwork.
Okay. So he's like a regular dude. No, he's a regular human ability.
Yeah.
Okay.
He got this chemical called pseudoderm, which a friend of his who is a professor, Tot Roeder, invented this substance that was used in medical patents that is like a fake skin. And he uses that to make the mask that he covers himself with, that he binds to himself with this gas that makes it unremovable unless you release the counter gas.
Sorry, my little vaguely claustrophobic body is having a strong reaction to the idea of something.
It does bother me when I consider it
being placed over my nose and mouth.
There's this great line in one of the first Denny O'Neil question stories where Todd asks the question how it fits, and he says, like a tattoo. He doesn't even notice it.
Wow. Yeah. Fascinating. So I guess breathable. I mean, that makes sense. Skin breathes.
Exactly.
I don't like thinking about that. Okay, I have to think
about
no,
it's creepy. The whole point of it is to creep people out. Okay. But on an idealistic level, it's about erasing his identity, that he's not a person when he's the question. He's an ideal.
Okay.
That's so interesting, too, because like when we, earlier in the episode, we were talking about who the questions were for and how like none of the questions were for him in that early iteration. It's like, it's even built into his reasoning for putting on the mask.
Yeah.
Right.
And it feels interesting, too, when it's a mantle that is passed, right? Because if it is not about him and his identity, then it is never about who's behind the mask. But it's so interesting that the the motivations, like the character motivations of like questioning society are such the big driver of like why they do what they do. That's cool. I like that.
It's an idea that dates back to Spider-Man. When Steve Ditko was creating Spider-Man, the idea was we need to give him a mask that covers his entire face, because the appeal of Spider-Man is that anybody can be Spider-Man. Under that mask, it could be anyone.
Yeah.
It's not about like Batman has that like chiseled chin of like just like a Forbes billionaire on there, somebody who's like paid for implants.
You'll always know it's Batman because he wears veneers.
Yeah, he's always been the Giga Chad meme.
That's so true.
Yeah. Like the one line I love from Brian Azzarello's Joker comic is where Joker asks Batman why he keeps that one piece of his face uncovered, and his answer is just to mock you. But that's not the case with Ditko's designs. With Spider-Man and with the Question, the idea is that they could be anybody, and that's kind of a big part of the appeal for me. Also, as a person who's always kind of felt a little bit of body dysmorphia, I like the idea of erasing my identifiable features. It's a concept that appeals to me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I wish I didn't have a face.
Yeah. And my brain is teeming. Sorry, I gotta slow down. I'm thinking too fast.
Oh, you want me to show you my collection?
Yes.
All right, let me take you on a tour.
Okay.
Okay, pick up my webcam.
Amazing. This is the best day of my life.
So here I have every collected edition of The Question.
Oh my gosh.
That's ever been put out.
Cool.
I've got some omnibuses. I've got my favorite appearances. I got every variation of The Question as an action figure that has ever been released.
Wow.
I've even got the Funko Pop against my better judgment, just for completionist sake. I got three versions of the same guy in different colored shirts because I had to have them all.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm about this life. I'm not just coming on here and making shit up. This is the thing I can't let go.
Coming on our obscure podcast to make this up.
Yeah.
It would be an incredible break.
As a person who collects like comic book cover variants for books I already have, I know that that's controversial, but like I get having the multiple colors of the same action figure. That makes sense.
I'm a big cover variant apologist because it's more work for more artists. Yeah. What's wrong with that?
It's cool art. It deserves to be seen. In fact, one of the first gifts that I gave Matt that I consider to be a very meaningful gift was a series of covers from a Teen Titans run.
Teen Titans was like my animated show.
That was like our friendship connection show.
Oh man. Yeah. I've been rewatching Teen Titans lately, and it sure was of its time.
Yes, very much.
So true.
It spoke to me as a 14-year-old very deeply.
Oh yeah.
Okay.
I mean, for a show called Teen Titans, it was very much for teens.
It was.
You gotta give it that.
You have to give it that. Okay, Alex, obviously you are question expert, question lover. Like, what is something about the question that you wish you got to talk about more? That like when people ask about the question, like what's something you don't get asked about that you wish you could tell people about the question?
I think when most people think about the question, they either think about Rorschach or they think about the Justice League Unlimited question. Mm-hmm. And what I want to impress about people is that the question is a figure of change. There's this metaphor that's used in the question number 2 of the old Zen koan of a man who dreams he's a butterfly, but on the other hand, he could be a butterfly who's dreaming he's a man. And like his entire thesis is about adjusting his point of view. One way of looking at the world isn't necessarily wrong when it contradicts another way. And from those experiences, we grow. That the question is not this weird tire tread on burst stomach, the whores and politicians will cry out, save us, and I will whisper no. Because as much as Rorschach was a criticism of this obscure superhero, I think when Alan Moore created him, he was also had very much that kind of like Batman in mind. The idea of just the idea of the hardcore brooding vigilante who stands iconoclastically to the government. Not just the question, but the idea of like the badass superhero who doesn't play by the rules, and how that's like, if that person existed in real life, he would be kind of pathetic. And Denny O'Neil very much came to the same conclusion as Alan Moore, and they both did the same thing, which was kill him. Except spoilers for the end of Watchmen. Read it anyway. It's a perfect comic.
It's very good.
I mean, that is actually a lot of the thesis of our show, Alex, is we're going to spoil things for you, but we think you should watch them anyway because it's worth the payoff, right? Like, we think you should read it anyway. You know, it's a good
so
story.
Intricate.
Yeah.
I sat in Barnes and Noble all day today just reading over Watchmen again, as I do like almost every year.
Yeah.
I get something new out of it every time. It's great.
Sidebar, I love reading comics in Barnes and Noble. That is like a delicious experience that I love in the world.
Yeah, last spring, Barnes & Noble opened up literally across the street from me, and I am there every single day.
Yeah, boy. I would too if I lived across the street from a Barnes & Noble. Damn.
I live back in the town that AC and I grew up in, and I had not spent a lot of time in Barnes and Nobles since moving away from this place.
Yeah.
And since I've just been like looking for something to do, because Tulsa's not exactly the most active place in the world, I now go to the Barnes and Noble that I grew up going to very regularly.
Yeah.
And just hang out and read comics or, write videos or whatever it might be.
Hell yeah.
One thing I do want to impress is that the Question is a character who does not really appear in comics anymore. Like, he's really, the Question fans, as few of us as there are, we're really lucky to get a Vic Sage appearance maybe once a year in the deep background of like a comic where 10,000 superheroes are there. Like, he's really kind of fallen out of favor. Like, I said he got killed off, but there have been a couple reboots since then. He's around. So there's an occasional pop up here and there, but like all of like the fandom around the Question has kind of drifted off to other things because we've run out of stuff to talk about because it's just not showing up places. And it feels weird to be a fan of a character who just does not show up for years at a time. It's one thing to be like a Lord of the Rings fan, where like you're a fan of a complete work that like you don't expect Gandalf to show up again in the comic. But like the fact that the Question is part of this universe that has new installments out every single week, you're like, maybe this week he's back. Maybe this week someone does something with him, and it just never happens.
Yeah, that makes me think, do you think that like the creation and like the prominence of the Question, like getting his own run, getting their own runs regardless of who is the Question at the time, is a product of the time that the Question was first conceived? Do you think it's because there's like less space for that kind of character for the modern reader? Or do you think it's more like there's another character who's filling that role, doing that kind of, Well,
there is another character who's fulfilling that role, and you may have heard of them. They're called Batman.
Okay, fair enough.
And the way that they will introduce entirely like new Batman stories that are like side stories as a way to like, frankly, it's to sell books. So I get it. I don't know. I like Batman too, but I can understand why that would be the case. Yeah.
In DC Comics, if your name is not Bruce Wayne, you're going to have a hard time getting panel space. That's what sells. People can't get enough of Batman.
So true. I mean, I think I like Batman as much as the next person. Obviously, Batman is like a character that is persisting in my life. But
sure.
we need more Batman hate in the chat, I think is what's going on here.
When you, like me, are a consumer of all DC media, there's a lot of Batman.
There's a lot of Batman.
There's just so much Batman.
That's a good reminder. Because like as a casual consumer of DC, right? Like I feel this way I feel this way, and I think my analogy here is like about X-Men. It's enough with the Wolverine. We do get it.
Yeah, Wolverine is your Batman. Absolutely.
We get it. Literally every other X-Men. Okay, I'm sorry to the Logan fans out there. Literally every other X-Men character is more interesting than Wolverine.
But like as X-Men fans, I'm sure you're diehard fans of one particular deep bench X-Men character.
Ilyana Rasputin. Magic.
I was like, Matt's coming in hot. He's ready.
Yeah. She's got a sword. She's got an accent. What's not to love?
Yeah. Also, not mutants, but Wiccan and Hulkling. I really only need the MCU to last as long as it takes to see an on-screen kiss between Wiccan and Hulkling.
I want that twink obliterated.
Exactly. Oh my God.
Okay.
I'm glad that we got there today.
Incredible. Mwah. I love her.
Yeah. So you get it. You understand what it's like to be a fan of this deep bench comic book character in a universe that persists forever.
Yeah.
That they're there and there's the potential for them to show up, but not this week, champ. Maybe next time.
Yeah. I feel like I did really, really luck out by them finally deciding to do something with Scarlet Witch prominently featured. Yeah. Now I do have opinions about how Scarlet Witch is portrayed, but that was my feeling about Scarlet Witch for a long time. She's much more famous now. So
sometimes you get lucky. Like one of the other characters I'm a major fan of is Cassandra Cain. The one true Batgirl.
Love.
And for many, many years, there was a great cast drought. And now she's like a major character in multiple DC titles. So like it can happen.
I loved Wayne Family Adventures, which was one that actually you recommended to me. And she's prominent as the rest of the Bat family is in there. And anyway, I can't wait to read more Cassandra.
Oh God, Wayne Family Adventures is so good. I can't wait for them to come out with season 4. I think they're coming up on.
Yeah. It's made me a webtoon freak.
Yeah.
I love it.
It's very funny that the most popular DC comic is a free web comic, but I guess that makes sense.
So we've mentioned that there's not been a lot of question stories recently.
Yeah.
I'm curious, like, why do the question stories work for you? Like, what are those stories about, and what are the ones that work the best? Like, what are the aspects of those or the attributes of those?
What I love about the question is that a good question story, even going back to the Justice League Unlimited question episodes, is that they're about failure. They're about someone who is so sure that the world is one way and the scales falling from their eyes and realizing the world is an entirely different way. In JLU, he's following this big conspiracy that he's sure Lex Luthor is behind with his bid to be president, when it turns out something else completely is going on.
Yeah.
And Luthor just kind of beats the shit out of him in his office as he taunts him about how off base he is. And like, that's the question to me, that he is just going to eventually arrive at the truth, but he's going to get the shit kicked out of him physically and emotionally and mentally at every step towards the way. In the Question Annual, in Denny O'Neill's run, the Question has a chance to honor this great sage who has like a dying wish to be united with his family before he dies, and he fails. There's this storm at sea, and the body is lost at sea. And he's like, well, what good am I? I can't even honor the dying wish of this great man. And later he finds out that the man's family also died at sea. And like, what really happened is that through his failure, he arrived at a greater truth. And it's just like, you never really know what the universe has in store for you. And it's very much different from Batman's idea of like following the Riddler themed clues to the Riddler so you can put him in jail and then fight the Riddler again next month. The Question doesn't really have supervillains. The Riddler shows up in one issue of the Question just kind of to poke fun at the idea of how ridiculous the concept of supervillains are. Just like the Riddler shows up on a bus to Hub City and he just comes off as this really pathetic loser. And when the Question starts asking him the riddles that plague him, the philosophical quandaries that keep him up at night, the Riddler has no response because that's not the kind of question he's into. Yeah. He's into things where the answer is like a big block of ice, or the doctor was a woman,
or you getting kaboinked on the head by a giant mallet. Yeah.
Oh, that's more Harley Quinn. But
That's true. That's true. It's so fair. That's so interesting. Do you think the question is like supposed to be a stand-in for the everyman in that way of like if somebody regular tried to do this is what would happen? Like, is he that kind of side character, or is he something else entirely?
He's a little bit like that. Yeah. He's a little more realistic, adheres a little more to what it would be like if one of us went out to try and like put on a mask and fight crime.
Yeah.
Even if we were really, really good, we would get the shit kicked out of us. We would go down the wrong avenues. And what the question and Batman have in common is that idea that they don't give up. They keep doing it. And that's really what the appeal of these street level superheroes are. That's the appeal of Daredevil. That's the appeal of other street level Marvel hero put here.
Yeah, really Deadpool.
Old school Spider-Man.
Spider-Man, yes. Yeah. Luke Cage.
Yeah. Jessica
Iron
Jones.
Fist.
Yeah.
Jessica Jones. Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D.
Oh, boy.
Hey, that's another episode we can do.
Oh, Lord. I was just naming TV shows.
Well, fair enough. That one just came for us unintentionally.
So we've talked a bit about the O'Neill run specifically, but I'm curious if there are any other, be it writers, be it artists, hell, be it letterers, that have brought something to the character that you find interesting.
Interesting, yes. Rick Veitch, who is best known for his work on like stuff like Swamp Thing, did this 2005 question miniseries where he basically made him this psychedelic drug addict who believed he could speak to cities. And it's a run that like a lot of Question fans are really into. I am not, personally. I think it's pretty distant from the things that make the Question relatable, but it is a very interesting take. Like I said, Greg Rucka did really cool stuff with him. Before 52, kind of a setup to that series was a mini series he wrote called Batman Huntress Cry for Blood, which, despite the title, has very little to do with Batman. Batman is in the title so that people buy it.
Right.
It's really more of a Question and Huntress story. And it kind of represents, in retrospect, the Question's first attempt to kind of find a protege and bring them back from the brink of darkness and learn the same lessons that he did, except trademark to the character, he fails. It doesn't stick. And like he tries to keep Helena Bertinelli, who's this daughter of a mob boss whose family is killed in front of her, and she swears to kill every member of the organized crime families in Gotham. She's basically DC's Punisher around that time. And he tries to show her there's a better way to live, and he fails. She goes around and kills the people she thinks needs killing anyway. And like, it's this very torrid kind of doomed love affair they have in the comics that gets an accidental happy ending in the cartoon. Maybe you remember the episode Double Date.
Oh yeah,
I did. In fact, watch parts of that episode before we talked today.
Yes, that was written by Gail Simone. And the similarities to Cry for Blood are actually a coincidence. Gail had never read Cry for Blood. She just accidentally arrived on the same exact story, but with a happy ending this time. Wow. Because she originally wanted to do a Birds of Prey story because, she came up on Birds of Prey. That was her big success. Except at the time, they weren't allowed to use Batman characters other than Batman, because they were being used by the Batman, another cartoon happening at the time.
One of those.
So because she couldn't use Barbara Gordon, she's like, well, what do I do now? And Dwayne McDuffie, who's the big Question fan, he's like, why don't you use the Question? And she's like, okay. And it turned into this cute Double Date thing. And it just so happened to coincidentally have the same plot structure as this comic that Greg Rucka had written with editor Denny O'Neil 6 years prior.
That's really cool.
Yeah.
So, question for you. If Vic Sage's Question is defined by failure, what is Renee Montoya's Question defined by anything other than maybe like subpar runs?
I think it's like Vic Sage, the question that Renee Montoya represents is a search for the self, who she is. Because as we find her on the outs of Gotham Central, she was forcibly outed as a lesbian by Two-Face. She was witness to these horrible incidents as a member of the police force that disillusioned her with her traditional view of good and evil. She was disowned by her family, and like she doesn't know who she is anymore. And the question is about finding her place. And many of these cult stories that Greg Rucka explores after 52 are about dealing with these different vices and how she uses them as crutches, and how we define ourselves by our flaws, and that how that's something to accept and grow past. And just the idea of Renee Montoya is the question, who am I? That's what that's really about. But now it's about whether she can be a superhero while also being a cop. And I think the answer is no. But she hasn't figured that out yet.
There's a lot of stories where the answer is no. I don't know that we needed another one to solve that question. I don't know that I have many more questions without like going and reading some of these runs myself. Maybe the next question is like, where would you recommend somebody like me who's like really excited by this part of the conversation? Like, where would you recommend I start? And like, I just want to say that this has been a very, very cool and interesting, like, I am not really good at like the history stuff behind comics. Folks who are like in it, right? Like Matt is really good at this. You are really good at this. Like knowing those like intricate details of like the writers and the different runs and stuff like that often helps build a different picture of like almost a different character, right? In particular with the question here, right? Like the version that's in JLU isn't the version that's in any, in some of these other stories or runs. Right. I'm not as familiar with anything outside of that. And so it's been very interesting to like learn that there are so many different iterations of it, and it's a mantle that's been passed like other characters and things like that. So where does somebody like me start? Where do we go?
Well, what I did is what happened to me is I went backwards. I started with Vic Sage's death in 52. And then from there I was like, well, where else has this guy been? So I think 52 is a great place to start because it's kind of gonna wean you from that animated incarnation to more like what he's done in comics. And that's a version of him that's very much connected to the Denny O'Neil characterization, just kind of Greg Rucka's loving tribute to the guy who helped him like create his own persona within the comic book writing world. So what I would recommend is that you read 52, then you go back and read The Question, then you read Gotham Central, and then you read 52 again.
Okay.
I like this plan.
I like this plan too.
I also like any plan that gets me to reread 52.
Okay.
Cry for Blood is optional.
Okay.
Put that in there.
Okay. I've got my notes. I've got my assignment. I'm really excited. I'm reading a very compelling but sort of dry nonfiction book right now, and I will need a palate cleanser after that. So I'm looking forward to it.
All right. To hear me blather on more about 52 every other week, you could listen to my podcast, 52 Pickup, where we dissect every single issue and extract every morsel of it panel for panel.
Hell yeah.
I love the thing you all said. I believe it was in episode 0 that you were like, it's so ambitious to do a weekly comic that we're not even going to try and do it with this show. Or maybe that was Gita that said that.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, we're doing a bi-weekly show about a weekly comic. That's
I love that.
That's where we're at.
I'm excited to get another 2 years of that show.
Hell yeah. Baby. Oh, and I got plans after that, believe me.
Boy, I'm excited.
Just make sure you're subscribed to the great website Aftermath, which provides great video game and culture criticism written by people who actually care about it and are not controlled by corporate interests who need to pivot to what the latest Fortnite trend is in order to tell you interesting stories.
They're lots of really good writing.
Yeah. To support great independent journalism, subscribe to that. And that's what funds us.
Hell yeah.
So, yeah.
Hell yeah.
Definitely am a subscriber. I've said many times, I'm a big fan of you, big fan of Gita, but also a lot of the folks from Aftermath. I've, followed Luke Plunkett over there for a long time. So, hey, Alex, what is your favorite either ongoing or recent limited series that people should pick up?
Oh, something that's in stores right now. Well, I really, really loved Jadzia Axelrod's Hawk Girl series. I think that's a really wonderful story about a character who has just not gotten her due since she was introduced in like 1999. And it's a sequel. It's sort of a semi-sequel to Jadzia's Galaxy, the Prettiest Star, which is a great coming-of-age trans story set in the DC universe. And it's just like this. It's unlike anything I've ever read before. And I think if you could check that out, that would mean a lot to me.
That's really sweet.
Yeah. I think listeners to this show would appreciate that.
Yeah.
Yeah. Sounds good.
Yeah. I'm also really enjoying Birds of Prey right now.
That I actually just remembered. I just remembered something. Existence of DC canon Judas implies the existence of DC canon Jesus. Is that true?
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, Satan's real. Lucifer's around.
That's true. Okay. All right.
Yeah,
I'm going to need
Jesus
more
is
time
real.
to recover and think about that.
Look, it's like it's like I grew up I grew up in an Orthodox Jewish home. It's like we believe Jesus existed, but was he the savior? I don't know.
Sure. Yeah. Just specifically Judas condemned to walk the earth forever because he betrayed Jesus is what's reminding me. Like,
don't worry.
DC
I will say
canon
that's probably not canon.
Sure. I just
It was at one point.
yeah.
It was at one point.
It's probably the cold open.
My little jokes.
Alex, is there anything you wanted to share with us before we sign off?
Okay. I have a monthly column at dc.com called Ask the Question, where you can submit your questions about the weird intricacies of the history and lore and scope of the DC universe, and I will do way too much research to figure out the answer for you if I don't know it off the top of my head already.
Alex, I'm
it's
obsessed.
my favorite thing ever.
I'm obsessed with the name of that column. That's amazing.
Yeah.
That's my favorite new thing. Incredible.
Yeah, and that's me. I'm the question now.
Hell yeah.
I've realized all my dreams.
Hell yeah.
Oh, check out Action Button, that YouTube channel that I do some work for, hosted by the great Tim Rogers.
I'm a big fan. We didn't mention it earlier, but
We got something big cooking. I can't say what it is, but we got something cooking.
Talking about having something big cooking, you guys always have something big cooking. It's always huge, and I'm always a fan of it. So.
Oh, this is something else. This is get ready to preemptively pick your jaw up off the floor.
Whoa.
If you liked the Boku video,
Whoa.
If you liked the Cyberpunk video,
Yes.
if you liked the Tokimeki Memorial video, this is just like another level of ambitious.
Incredible.
I cannot believe this thing I'm working on. I'm very, very excited about
Amazing.
Yeah. I must shout out, and this is shouting out a different co-host of yours. The thing that I am stoked about that is sort of in your realm of influence is Demon School.
Demon School rules.
Yeah, that Brendan Sheffield and that team are working on. I am so excited. But yeah, glad to have you here. Big fan of Insert Credit. Big fan of 52 Pickup.
I mean, let's complete the trifecta. Shout out to the Video Game History Foundation.
Yeah.
Frank
Hey.
Cifaldi, my co-host on Insert Credit, doing the important preservational work. They recently announced that they're opening up this digital library of every video game magazine ever published.
Holy shit.
Which is just this incredibly ambitious history-changing endeavor they're doing. So check that out and give them some money so they can keep doing it. And yeah, I happen to be fortunate to work with a lot of cool people and also my favorite characters.
Yeah. That
And you
rules.
also do really great work yourself. So.
Yeah, thank you.
Yeah.
Hey, where can people find you on the internet if you would like to be found on the internet?
You can find me at alexjaffe.bisky.social. I am Hub City Question in the DC community.dcuniverseinfinite.com. And I think that's about it.
Cool.
That's where I'm at.
Hell yeah.
Twitter's a cesspit, you know.
We know. I think to quote myself many episodes ago at this point, you know, piss baby, Elon Musk, et cetera, et cetera. Yeah.
Yeah.
Hey, AC, where can people find you on the internet?
People can find me on the internet at acfachi.com, a website specifically that I built so that we could have something to link to that was not Twitter for me. So find me at acfachi.com, where you can pretty much find links to this show, which you can find at can'tletitgo.gay.
Correct. You can find me at matthorton.live. As AC just said, you can find the show at can'tletitgo.gay. You can find us on Instagram, Threads, and TikTok at can'tletitgo.gay.
We have a TikTok. It's there.
We do. Thanks to The Worst Garbage for having us. You can find the network at theworstgarbage.online.
You can find us in the Discord. Sorry, Matt. I'm so excited. Come hang out with us in the Discord. We'll chat with you about Traitors Season 2. If you want to talk to me about Traitors Season 2, we'll chat with you about the question. Whatever it is, we're there. It's hot. There's stuff going on. Come hang out.
Yeah. Shout out to the people that help us make the show. Scout, who made our art. When she has commissions open, you can find her at co-fi.com/humblegoat. I got my commission back from Scout.
Oh my God, it's so cute.
Of my avatar, and I love it. Thank you so much, Scout. Thank you to @Pragmatism on Twitter, my friend Ethan, for making our music. And next time, I am thrilled to tell you.
Oh my God.
That we're going to be talking about The Matrix Resurrections and Sense8.
Oh, baby. What a hot movie.
I love that movie so
Matrix
much.
Resurrections is so good. God damn.
That movie rules. Matt and I are going to gush at you about gay techno culture, and it's going to be gay and fun. Yeah. And that's what we promise here on this show.
Especially gay, especially trans.
Yeah.
We love Lana Wachowski.
Wow. Okay. I think that's it, right. Matt. We did it. Another episode. Yeah. Thank you, Alex, for coming and being our guest. It was our honor to have you on the show today.
Of course.
1 year.
Whenever you want to talk about Taskmaster, I'll be back.
Yes.
Maybe that's the reason that I will actually invest time in watching Taskmaster.
Your time starts now.
All right. We'll talk to you all next time.
Bye.
TWG, The Worst Garbage, online.
Oh my God, Alex, thank you so much.
Oh, that was a hoot.